Hi, welcome back to the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. I'm Jesus Ramirez. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 powerful techniques to cut out trees in Photoshop without halos or fringing. This Photoshop tutorial will be filled with useful tips and tricks that you will be able to apply to any masking job, not just trees. I'll go through 3 images that will require different techniques. No masking technique will work with every image, so you need to have several tricks up your sleeve to make sure that you get the best cutouts possible. In this Photoshop tutorial, you'll learn about the Blend If command and how you can create true transparency with it. You'll also learn about the Defringe command, which allows you to remove edge, fringes, and halos. Then you'll learn about the tree generator and how you can use it to create custom brushes to give your trees a virtual trim. This is going to be an information-packed Photoshop tutorial, so make sure that you watch to the very end so that you don't miss a thing. All right, let's get started with today's Photoshop tutorial. In this first example, I'm going to use this image. It has a tree right in front of a blue sky with some grass, and the tree is already pretty isolated. The sky is blue, and that's going to help us with this first technique. What I'm going to show you now should help you in most situations like this. First of all, if your layer is locked, click on the lock icon to unlock it. Then you can double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window. And from here, you can use the Blend If sliders to hide or show pixels based on their brightness or the brightness of an individual RGB channel. Let me quickly show you what I mean by that. If I go into the channels panel, you'll see the RGB channels, red, green, and blue. These channels represent how much light there is in that particular color. By default, you'll see a grayscale image. White is that light at full intensity, and black is no light of that particular color. The different shades of gray represent the different intensities of that light. And all 3 RGB channels combined make up the RGB composite, which is the image that you're working with. So what you need to do is see which channel has the most contrast. In this case, the blue channel has more contrast between the foreground and background because the sky is blue, so there's a lot of blue light there. And keep this in mind, in the blue channel, the sky is white and the tree is black. Next, click on the RGB composite view and go back into the layers panel and double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window. And we're going to use that same channel, the blue channel. If you remember, the sky was white and the tree was black. So we can use this black point or this white point to hide the corresponding pixels in the blue channel. To be very clear, we're not hiding blue pixels. We're going to hide the bright pixels in the blue channel. So if I click and drag on this white point, you'll see how I start hiding the bright pixels in that channel. And if I select the black point and drag it to the right, now I hide the dark pixels in that channel. So I can very quickly remove the sky by using this slider. Also, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac to split the slider in half to create a smoother transition between invisible and visible pixels. Just drag the 2 handles further away from each other to smooth out the transition. If you want to learn more about the Blend If sliders and how they work, then check out my crash course on Blend If. It's one of my best Photoshop tutorials. I really think you'll get a lot out of it. I'll place a link to it down below in the description. But anyway, once you have this slider set, you can press OK, and we have the cutout. Now, there's one very important thing that you need to notice. In the layer thumbnail, you can see that the background is still visible. That means that there is no real transparency. It's just a blend. So if I create a levels adjustment layer, for example, and clip it to the layer below and make an adjustment, notice how the sky comes back. That's because I'm adjusting the brightness, therefore I'm adjusting the channels. And if I adjust the channels, then I adjust how the blend is applied. So this is not a good thing if your intention is to cut out the tree. So what do you do? Well, you can convert this layer into actual transparency, and it's really easy to do. All you need to do is right click on the layer and select Convert to Smart Object. And notice now that the layer thumbnail has that checkerboard pattern indicating actual transparency. And no matter what changes I make, the sky does not come back because we're working with actual transparency now. If you want to change the blend, all you need to do is double click on the Smart Object thumbnail to open that up into a new tab. and you can then double click to the side of the layer to bring up the blend if sliders, and you can continue making your adjustments through here. Once you're done, you can press OK, close the smart object, save it, and the changes will be automatically applied to your working document. And what I'll do now is I'll create a layer underneath the tree layer. If I just create a layer, it'll place it right above it. And I don't want that. I want the layer below the tree layer. So what you can do is hold Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, and click on the new layer icon to create a layer below the currently selected layer. And now I can fill it with whatever color I want. So I'll select a medium gray and I'll press Alt and Backspace on Windows. That's Option Delete on the Mac to fill with the foreground color. And this is the result for the first method. In this next example, we also have a tree that is isolated, but it's not up against the blue sky. Also, there's a lot of highlights around the edges, so the blend diff will not work as well in a situation like this. What I'm going to do instead is create a channel-based selection or a channel-based mask. In other words, I'm going to use a channel to make the mask. And what you want to do is go into the channels panel and click on each individual channel and see which one has the most contrast between the foreground and background. In this case, again, the blue channel is the best one to work with, so I'm going to click and drag it into the new channel icon to duplicate it. And what I can do now is work with this duplicate copy. The first thing that I'll do is select the Lasso tool, and I'm going to make a very rough selection out of the tree, like so. Then I'll right click and choose Select Inverse to flip the selection inside out so that now everything is selected except the tree. Notice that white is my foreground color. So I'll press Alt and Backspace on Windows, Option Delete on the Mac to fill with the foreground color. And then I'll press Control D, Command D to deselect. What I'm going to do now is use the dodge and burn tools to either brighten or darken pixels, and that will help me create my mask. Also, I'm going to make the tree white because in a mask, white is selected and black is not. So I'll press Control I on Windows, Command I on the Mac to invert. And then I can now select the burn tool and select shadows from the range option here in the options bar. Exposure is how intense the burn tool will make pixels darker. Something small like 14% is good. And I can just build on the dark pixels, meaning I'm making them darker. Notice what happens if I increase the exposure to 100% when I paint. I just make a much, much stronger adjustment. In some cases, this may not be the way to go. I prefer to be subtle. So I like to bring the exposure down and then just build accordingly, like so. So I can just make the darker pixels darker. Remember, I selected the shadows, so I'm not affecting the white pixels. So this is a really good tool to use when creating a channel-based mask. So let me just quickly paint on that, like so. This looks really, really good. And I can always come in, of course, and paint with black on these areas. Let me select a different brush, and I'll select this soft round brush, and then I can paint with black. Black is my background color, and I can bring it up to the foreground color by tapping the X key on the keyboard. And then I can reduce the size by tapping the left bracket key on the keyboard. That's right next to the letter P in North American keyboards, and I can paint with black. So the point is the black pixels will hide the areas that I'm painting on, and the white pixels will reveal them, like so. And what I can do now is either paint with white on these areas to reveal the tree, or I can use the opposite tool of the burn tool, which is the dodge tool. So let me select that. It's right here. And the dodge tool makes pixels brighter, and you can select highlights from the range. And I'll bring the exposure down a bit, and I'll just start making the highlights brighter, like so. And you can just keep painting accordingly. When you're done, you can double click on the hand tool to fit the image to screen, and we can make a selection out of this. All you need to do is hold Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, and click on the blue channel copy thumbnail to load it as a selection. See that? See how it made the marching ants over the tree? I can click on RGB, go back into the layers panel, and click on the new layer mask icon to create a layer mask that will hide everything but the tree. What I'll do now is create a solid color fill layer I'll make it a light gray, press OK, and bring it underneath the tree like so. Let me zoom in so that you can see the result. And you can see that there's a little bit of fringing, those halos around the edges of my mask. If you get that, then there's a couple things that you can do to minimize it. The first thing that you can try is to make the pixels that are almost black completely black. If you have a color that is just off black, it will create a ghosting effect. To make the pixels in a mask completely black, make sure that you have the mask selected. Then go into Image, Adjustments, Levels, and make sure that all the darkest pixels are as dark as they could be. See how we're removing some of the halo that was around these areas here? If you click on this icon, you'll see the before and the after. You can also press the P key on the keyboard for any window that has the preview button to enable or disable it. So that definitely improved it. And if you want to, you could also go into Filter, Other, Minimum, which contracts the mask. And I can just keep dragging the slider to make the mask smaller. Obviously 4 pixels is way too much. It's just bringing it in way too much. So I can bring it in just a little more. So see before and after. This might be too much, so maybe just 0.2 pixels brings it in just enough to remove some of the fringing. And by the way, I have a really good tutorial on the minimum and maximum filter that I think you really will enjoy. I go into depth on how these filters can help you with many common masking problems like removing halos and fringing from mask edges. Check it out after this tutorial. I'll place a link in the description. If after applying the minimum filter, you're still having halos and fringing around your mask edges, what you can try to do is use one of Photoshop's oldest masking tools under the matting menu. I don't see a lot of people using it, so let me show it to you now. What you need to do is select your layer and click and drag it into the new layer icon to duplicate it. Or you could have pressed Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to duplicate, and right click on the layer mask and select Apply Layer Mask. So now the layer mask is gone and we have a tree, just a cutout. And what I'm gonna do now is go into the layer menu, and at the very bottom we have this matting option, and I can select Defringe. What this command does is it looks at the edge pixels and it swaps the color with pixels that are a little bit further away. In this dialog box, you can enter the width of the ring around the edges of your layer. In this case, I'll select a width of 2 pixels and I'll press OK. And you see now that Photoshop brought the color of these darker pixels inward. See that? I'll undo that. Control Z, Command Z on the Mac to undo. See that? See how we filled it in? I'll do it again. Layer, matting, Defringe. And this time, why don't we go for 3 pixels and see what result we get? I'll press OK, and it made it just a little darker. So what I'm going to do now is select this layer and change the blending mode to darken. The darken blending mode looks at the pixels in both layers and it keeps the darkest ones. So I don't want Photoshop to replace the darker pixels. I'm happy with those. I just want Photoshop to replace the bright pixels on the edges. So before and after. See that? Much better. I'll double click on the hand tool to fit the image to screen. And what I could do now is select this top fringe layer and press Ctrl Alt G, Command Option G on the Mac to clip it to the layer below. That way the visible pixels of this layer are controlling the layer on top, before and after. See that? Subtle effect, but it completely removes the fringe. So consider using the matting options under the layer menu. Layer, matting, defringe. And I should also mention that if you have a black or white fringe, you can use the remove black matte or remove white matte options. In this next example, I'm going to show you how to cut out a tree that does not have a solid background behind it. The colors next to this tree are very similar to the tree itself, so it's going to be more difficult to mask using the techniques we used earlier. If you notice in the channels panel, all the channels don't have a lot of contrast in between the foreground and background color, so the previous 2 techniques will not be the best. So what I'm going to do in this case is select the layer, and I'm just going to zoom in and start selecting the tree trunk here with the quick selection tool. Just click and drag up. And then I'm going to zoom out. I'm doing so by holding Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and scrolling down on the mouse wheel. Next, I'm going to add to this selection with the Lasso tool. So I'll select it from the toolbar. Then I'll hold Shift to add to my current selection, and I'm just going to freehand a selection around my tree. Notice the wide gap that I'm leaving between the edges of the tree and my selection, and that's what you want. Then you can click on the new layer mask icon to create a layer mask. What I'm going to do now is create a brush that is going to help me paint back in the edges of this tree. To do so, I'm going to go into the File menu, select New, and I'm just going to create a new document. The document doesn't really matter as long as you have a large enough document. I'm going to do 1920 by 1080 and click on Create, and this is my new document here. Then I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to show you a really cool feature inside of Photoshop. Photoshop actually has trees inside of it. So if you go into Filter and Render, you can get the tree generator. And to be quite frank with you, maybe this is where you want to start. Maybe there is no need to cut out a tree. But if you don't find a tree in here that you like, then you will have to cut one out from a photo. And you can go into where it says Base Tree Type and select a tree. And then you can see the preview of that tree. If you press the down arrow key on the keyboard, you can toggle between all the different trees. So you can find a tree that more closely resembles to the one that you're working on. So I'm just gonna keep going down and see if I find something that I like for my particular image. And I think I like this one here called Ash Tree. And this looks pretty good. You can adjust the settings if you like to adjust the tree, but the defaults work great for me. And I'm gonna press OK. Photoshop will generate this tree into a new layer. Then with the lasso tool still selected, I'm gonna click and drag under the bottom part here with the tree trunk. And I'm gonna hit the backspace key on Windows, that's the delete key on the Mac, to delete those pixels. And I'm also gonna do the same thing for areas that I don't like that area there. I'll delete it. And I think that the rest is fine. So what I'll do now is press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to copy that, and I'll select the Move tool and just rotate it like so. I'll click on the check mark to commit the changes. Then with the top layer selected, you can press Ctrl E on Windows, Command E on the Mac to merge down. So now I have both layers on a single layer, and that's what I want. Then I can go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and I'm just gonna make it black. So I'm gonna click on the black point and drag it all the way to the right, and click on this white point and drag it all the way to the left. So I just have a silhouette of that tree. And I can turn this into a brush simply by going into Edit, Define Brush Preset, and I can just call it Tree Brush, like so, and press OK. So now I can paint with that tree, like so. But I want it to be a little more random than that. So what I'll do is press Ctrl Z, Command Z on the Mac to undo. Click on this icon to bring up the brush settings, and then enable shape dynamics. And I'm going to click on the angle jitter and rotate it all the way through, like so. Now when I paint, you can see that it's much more random, and that's what I want. And it's not perfect because you can still see some repetition. You see that there? So why don't we adjust it just a little more? We can also increase the size jitter just a little bit. And we can try that one more time. So I'll create a new layer and I'll paint, and that looks much, much better. What I'll do now is go back into my working document, and I can adjust my brush size by tapping on the left or right bracket keys on the keyboard. Those are right next to the letter P in North American keyboards. And if I paint with white on my layer mask, I can reveal the pixels that are hiding and bring them back, and it will look like actual leaves on the tree. This is a really, really cool effect, as you can see right there. And you might want to increase the brush in Paint or decrease it in Paint. It really depends on the image that you're working with and the effect that you want to create. Also, if you start bringing back some areas that you don't like, you can switch the foreground color to black by tapping on the X key and then just paint away using that same brush, and it creates that effect that you see there. Obviously, you might want to spend some time in your image fine-tuning it further to get better results, but I think that in this case, we've done a pretty good job. I'll create a new solid color fill layer, make it gray, and bring it down so you can see the final result. I'll zoom in so that you can see what those edges look like. In some areas like this, if you like the mask but you don't like what it reveals, what you can do is create a new layer above the tree layer, press Ctrl Alt G, Command Option G in the Mac to make a clipping mask. Then select the Clone Stamp tool, and from the options bar under Sample, make sure that Current and Below is selected, and then hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to sample, and then just paint away the edges that you don't like with similar pixels to the inside of the tree. Or you can sample from a similar edge and paint with that so it more closely resembles the actual leaves of that part of the tree. I'll double click on the hand tool to fit the image to screen, and now you can see my final result. I really hope that you enjoy these techniques and that you find them useful. And if you think that they will help you with your creative projects, then go ahead and click on that like button now and let me know in the comments which of these techniques you're planning to use. Also, remember to check out both my Blend If crash course and my minimum and maximum filter explanation. I think that you really will enjoy those videos and you will learn a lot from them. If you're new to the Photoshop training channel, then click on that subscribe button now. And whether you're subscribing for the first time or you're already subscribed, then click on that notification bell so that you don't miss any new Photoshop tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again in the next video.